I flatter myself that you might have asked what negative philosophy means. It could easily be interpreted to mean a philosophy where we whine about things all the time. Well, it isn't that. Negative philosophy is a philosophy where we take away, as the strapline on there says, the deconstruction of your conceptual and behavioral programming. Well, why might you want to do that? Well, because it's problematical very often, and it's a cause of pain. And in truth, it steals our lives. We become full of stuff that we've taken in from the environment, typically from your parents, teachers, peers, maybe siblings, whoever else, maybe religions, spiritual leaders, whatever else you've turned to essentially tell you how the world works. You will be, as a result of all of that, heavily programmed. And most of that programming will be, well, just in some cases just plain wrong. But the greatest travesty about it is that in effect you become your programming. You're no longer you as you was when you were, let's say 4 or 5 years old. You become your programming. Maybe you've been told to be productive, to be helpful, to be kind, to be a whole pile of things that people might tell you to be, to look good. And hey presto, by the time you're 20 or 30, you're pretty well fully programmed. So there are two aspects to this. One is the behavioral or emotional programming, and the other one is the conceptual programming. So let's start with the emotional programming or conditioning. Now, most of us are slaves to our emotions. And the emotions are driven by one thing, and that is how well you are doing in life. They're not driven by anything else. By how well you're doing, I mean how well you are surviving. So if you win $1 million on the lottery, you're going to be happy, at least for a while anyway. If you have a very good meal somewhere, you're probably going to be happy. If you meet a new sexual partner, you're going to be happy, because the basic driver in all of us is to reproduce and to survive. And your emotions are effectively your barometer, telling you how well you're doing that. Now, if we're just a slave to the emotions, then we're going to be subject to the highs, you won $1 million on the lottery, and the lows, your partner's just left you and gone off with your best mate, or something. So we become slaves of fortune, slaves to fortune. Now, if your life's sort of okayish, you might be okay with that. There are reasons not to be okay with it, but I'll get onto that later. But if your life is like most people's lives, maybe it's full of emotional upset, difficult relationships, maybe it's full of some fairly bad childhood experiences that have conditioned you in a certain way, maybe it's full of anxiety about money, your career, whatever. Because at the end of the day, we strive to survive. It doesn't just happen. So depending on whether the striving is successful or not, so you will have good or bad emotions, or positive or negative emotions, as people like to call them. So is it possible to do anything about this? Well, the answer is yes, it is. The way that we get a handle on the emotions is through understanding them. So I've given a fairly major clue as to the nature of the emotions. When things are going well for you, you will be having a so-called positive emotion. Maybe it's love, or what you call love. Someone who brings you a great deal of pleasure, a new sexual partner, say. This is the drive to reproduce coming in, to procreate. We don't create these drives, they're in there. We wouldn't be the most successful species on the planet if we didn't have very, very strong drives to procreate and to survive. There's a whole story there, but I won't go into it. But in any case, once you start to understand the nature of your emotions, so let's say somebody pushes in front of you in a queue, and you've been stood there for 20 minutes and you just want to get out of the queue. And is that going to annoy you? Yes, it is going to annoy you. You might not do anything about it, but it's going to annoy you, probably make you fairly angry. So, why is that the case? Well, because somebody else has demonstrated their dominance over you. This is, again, a survival thing. Of course, being one further back in the queue isn't going to end your life, probably anyway. But nonetheless, somebody else is demonstrating to you that they have some dominance over you by just cutting in front of you. And you won't like that. So we get to understand what's going on. The understanding is a very, very powerful tool with the emotions, because you can say to yourself, oh, yeah, I can see what's going on here. I feel kind of diminished because this guy has asserted himself in front of me. That's why I'm feeling angry. And there are ways to deal with the anger, but now is not the time or place. So, emotional conditioning. And there's another thing with emotional conditioning. We want to get back to some kind of freedom within ourselves. We don't want to be cycling around a familiar set of emotions over and over and over again. So we need to find ways to deconstruct these emotional responses. That doesn't mean going into denial. What it actually means is understanding them and having methods to deal with them when they arise. Because, slowly but surely you can get to a stage where your emotions are less troublesome. You can compare the emotions with the weather. So instead of there being storms and blizzards blowing all the time, maybe you get some nice, calm, balmy days, which allows something else to come through instead of all the programming. What you were when you were young, when you were a child, instead of being this programmed emotional robot. So that's the emotions. I should add that this is not, what I'm talking about here is not, a 1-week workshop or read a couple of books. This is a lifestyle. It's a way to live. Living to try and understand yourself and to decondition what the first 20 years or so of your life conditioned. Anyway, so that's emotional conditioning. It isn't easy to deal with all that stuff, but the rewards are very significant. Anyway, we then come to knowledge and your ideas, your concepts. Your pretense of knowledge is like a swarm of maggots. All they leave behind is the bones. So, I'll give you an example. Ask somebody what they think happens after you die and they will have a fucking opinion. Usually anyway. Oh, nothing. You speak to an atheist. Nothing. There's nothing left. They don't know that. But they tell themselves that because it fills a vacuum. And we don't like a vacuum. Or speak to a Christian and they'll say, well, I'll go and meet Jesus or something like that. Speak to a Buddhist, oh, it's the void. Everybody's got an opinion, but nobody knows. Now, there are people who claim they know. That's fine, but do you know? It doesn't matter what other people claim to know. Do you know? And the chances are no, you don't. So can't we stay with that? Don't know. Has life got a purpose? And most people will invent one because, again, they don't like the vacuum. So for many people, they say, my purpose is to bring up my kids. My purpose is my career, my ambition, my whatever it is, or to become a good musician, or to... They'll have a purpose. Well, you know, when I talk about purpose, I'm not talking about just, my purpose is to get up in the morning and go to work. Well, that isn't a purpose. Purpose denotes some kind of final cause, some end goal to the whole thing. And people invent the end goals. But what if there isn't one? What if your life is totally without purpose, totally meaningless? Can you bear that? Can you be with that? Anyway, these pretenses of knowledge deprive you of something very important. And what they deprive you of is a kind of childhood not knowing, a kind of spontaneity of being here and now. Now, I dislike all that here and now crap as much as you do. Here and now, being in the moment, blah blah blah. All of that stuff doesn't work on its own. You need understanding. But anyway, to get back to this, we anthropomorphize. We project our human sensibilities onto the rest of the universe. So we believe that the rest of the universe knows something about truth. What if there is no such thing as truth? And in fact, your ideas of truth will be almost certainly totally fucked up, because there is no such thing as truth. The universe doesn't know anything about truth. Now, in the human domain, we can say, well, I've got truth of fact, the sky is blue, or truth of concept, truth of logic, which is A equals B, B equals C, so A equals C, some kind of logical thing. But they're mundane truths. They almost don't qualify for the title of truth. The truth we're talking about, is there some kind of truth about the nature of our existence? And because we ask those questions, we then project them out onto the world and think, well, there must be something out there that knows about this truth. What if truth is just a human idea the rest of the fucking universe knows nothing about? Same with purpose. What if purpose is just a human concept? Because we're striving to exist, and because we go to work to earn money. The purpose of going to work is to earn money. So we think in those terms. And so we then project that out onto the universe. Well, the universe must have a purpose. No. I don't think the universe knows anything about purpose or meaning. And, this gets deeper. The rabbit hole gets deeper. Does the universe know anything about knowledge? Or is that just a human thing? It looks like it's just a human thing. So, trying to know the truth or know reality is just a misplaced idea. Because, we can say, well, I know how to tie my shoe, or I know how to catch a train, or catch an airplane or something, but, those are, again, back to our survival thing. We know how to achieve an end. But what if knowledge in the universe actually doesn't mean anything? There's no such thing. It's just a human thing. So the aim really is to deconstruct all of those concepts. Is this difficult? Yes, it is. Is it painful? Yeah, it is. And it can be very, very challenging. The idea for the negative philosophy came from something that happened in the Middle Ages. There was something called the Negative Theology. So instead of people saying God is this, God is good, God is great, God is generous, God is, all pile of things, they started to say, oh well, God doesn't have a colour, obviously that's just a human thing. God doesn't have weight, because that just belongs to stuff. God doesn't have a size, God doesn't exist in time. So it was a negative approach to trying to understand something that is beyond understanding in truth. But that theology and this philosophy go towards the same thing, which is to leave one in a state of wonder, or in a state of kind of tension. So children are kind of innocently innocent. They don't know they're being innocent. As an adult, it's possible to become knowingly innocent, which is to be an adult and a child at the same time, in actual fact. So, what happens when your emotions calm down and are not colouring your existence every minute of the fucking day? I'm angry about this. Oh, look, I'm so happy about you, blah, blah, blah. Up and down all the time. What happens when that kind of calms down and you get some inner peace starting to come about? And what happens when all this nonsense that we have in our heads, all these ideas that we have about truth and knowledge and right and wrong and morality and so on, what happens when all of those ideas have been seen for the nonsense that they are? Well, you can come to realize that you know absolutely nothing. That you are staring at a huge fucking void. And yet here you are, existing, and you know nothing about it. Now, if that isn't a mystery, I don't know what is. And as the quote says here, it's from Dune. If you've not read Dune, the books, then you're missing something. But Frank Herbert wrote Dune, and he says, the mystery of life isn't a problem to solve, but a reality to experience. The problem is, most people haven't got a mystery left, because they think they know everything. And besides, their emotional state is filling the space all the time, so they don't have any incentive or ability or energy to just have a look at the reality of the situation. Here you are, existing, but you know absolutely nothing about it whatsoever. There's only one thing you can do in that situation. And here I'm going to get a bit... I suppose some people use the word spiritual, but for me it's not spiritual, it's just a natural response to knowing nothing. And yet here I am. All you can do is bow before that, in a kind of humility, because you know nothing about this just amazing thing that you exist and that a world around you seems to exist. And there again, there are some ideas that can be deconstructed, but it's enough. So that's what the negative philosophy is all about. So if you are even remotely interested, I hope that's clarified a few things for you.